No worries. The stream is live. It tells us. I think we are live, Mike.
Yes. Okay, so we should be live as of right now. My camera just died immediately before this, so I'm just troubleshooting a little bit with a second camera. But we can just kind of introduce ourselves anyways.
No worries. So.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just introduce myself really quick. I know that I'm not on camera, but my name is Michael Rubloff. I am the founder and managing editor of RadianceFields.com. And essentially, Janusz and I have gotten together and decided to start a weekly series going through people in the Radiance Field community and talking about their journey thus far and things of that nature. But Janusz, do you want to introduce yourself really fast?
Yeah, I'm Janusz. Most people know me under the pseudonym Mr. Nerve. So this came because I was really fascinated with neural radiance fields and also Gaussian splatting when it took off. And I got my pseudonym because I really love to take captures and also to play with the code. And I'm a professional software engineer working in this field. And we decided, Michael and I, that we start a podcast to interview people working in this field who share publicly the knowledge and have some experience in creating captures. But our goal is also to talk to our scientists who are working on the forefront of radiance fields, just to tell people what's going on in the world, where we are heading towards, and what the prospects of radiance fields are. And our first guest tonight is Ian. He's known as Scanner Ian. If you are on Twitter or on LinkedIn, you maybe know his captures. They are great. They are very professional. He's one of the greatest 3D scanner people in the world I know of. He's sharing consistently captures almost every day, and I really enjoyed watching it. So our goal was to invite Ian to have him as expert to learn more about how to create great captures. And I would love to, if you would introduce yourself, Ian.
Thank you. It's Ian, but it's fine.
Ian,
So my name is Ian George, and I'm from Edinburgh originally. I've lived in Scandinavia, Southeast Asia, Australia for a number of years, over a decade out of the UK. And I currently reside in Glastonbury, England. I'm the company director at Cosmic Oak Media. And I've been scanning with mobile scanning apps since 2019, I suppose. I was fortunate enough to grow up in Edinburgh, so there's a lot of architecture and history there that made me feel like, when I take photographs, when I tell stories, it's all to do with history and archaeology and architecture. So when 3D scanning came along, I found it like a logical progression to capture those things and share them with the world, from this country to others. And of course, where I live here at the moment in England is I have 4 cities on my doorstep. I have Wales, Bath, Bristol and Cardiff, all within like a 2-hour radius of Glastonbury. So I've enjoyed sharing my scans, and thanks very much. It's very nice to be considered a kind of world expert on things like that. But really, all I've done at the end of the day is wave at a phone or an iPad or a DSLR or a cinema camera at beautiful buildings that are already there anyway. It's just a new form of photography or videography, you could say, scanning. And the evolution of how it's come from photogrammetry, which is a Victorian thing, to where we are today with radiance fields is absolutely astounding how fast it's moved and where it's going as we move forward to building architecture for the forthcoming metaverse or the omniverse or the 3D internet of tomorrow. So yeah, thanks very much for interviewing me, and I look forward to sharing some of my knowledge.
It's a pleasure to having you here with us tonight. So what got you hooked up with 3D scanning? So what was your first scans? Do you remember?
So my first scans, I suppose, you know, the first scans I ever did were using one of these Intel RealSense things. They're like
Hmm.
a, you know, I used that with a 360 camera back in 2018. Some friends of mine who are better coders than I am encouraged me to use my knowledge of 360 cameras for a start. We all chipped in and bought a RealSense thing, and we started scanning things, and I was just amazed what we could do, make 3D objects. And then I was amazed further when they started putting these 3D objects geospatially in places around Glastonbury, so we could just take out a phone with an app on it and point it and see our models floating in the air. You know,
Hmm.
I scanned the Glastonbury Tor, for example, and this was like 6 years ago, and I was like, wow. And somebody
Oh
said to
yeah.
me, tomorrow the internet's going to be like this. It'll be so easy because Google Maps and stuff, they'll have geospatial locations, so you'll just be able to use
Hmm.
the target for your augmented reality will just become the building, a famous building or a landmark building, and other things as well. So that really excited me. So I suppose back then in 2018, it was the RealSense, Intel RealSense little thing, and it was only a few £100, you know, and you clip another camera and a phone underneath, and we walked about. We used some special software for that, like Call Map, I think,
Hmm.
to bring what they call the sparse points. When I explain sparse points to people who are non-technical, I try to metaphor it into like like it's taking a spray can. If you can imagine, like you've got a spray can in your hand, and as you spray something, the paint goes there. Well, that's what happens with sparse points. They kind of outline a 3D object. And one of the breakthroughs in the spray can, if you like, was the mobile LiDAR, which arrived on the iPads and iPhones 2019, 2020. They were mobile, and you know they've been on their devices ever since, and they were absolutely amazing. That you could just use a lidar and pull it, put an app on the phone, and then just scan. This is something that I scanned with a LiDAR back a few years ago. It's a nice 3D object, but this is where it evolved to through Radiance Fields, is this photorealistic look that you get, which is absolutely astounding, you know, because taking that 3D object and adding a background and adding lighting to make it look photorealistic is a lot of work in Blender, whereas this is something that's done on a phone. That scan there, the second one, is done in a matter of minutes by just making sure you make the right movements across an object to offer a parallax view to the camera, so that when the 3D is reconstructed, you upload the video, and powerful processors, NVIDIA and what have you, graphics cards by the app developers, process your scan and deliver it back to you within an hour. And then you've got these beautiful photorealistic views, and this magic reveal as well, as the scan opens up, usually has people's jaws dropping on the ground. So they're very special. They're very special, and they allow us to make 3D in a matter of minutes, which is great. It's terrific, and it's very easy to. It's not difficult.
So did it start out as a hobby, or is it?
It did. It started out as a hobby and a challenge, but also because of the geeky friends that I've got. You know, we just all like to code and hack and do stuff like that. So this was it was a good way of hacking, if you like, to see what we could do with the technologies that were available to us 6 years ago. Thankfully, in 2019, there was a brilliant app. I think Ubisoft, the software developer, owned it at the time. It was called Displayland. And that allowed a photogrammetry from a mobile device, so that you could make it really, really nicely, as long as you covered all the sides of an object. This is some examples here that
Oh, Ian is gone.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, we could kind of just keep. Oh, he's back again.
yeah, and it was so easy just to, you know, well, I say easy, you know, you've got to make sure that you make a kind of curved movement over a scene like this. It's not an object. When you have an object like this, fish house here, this medieval fish house in Mere, close to Glastonbury. This is what they used to feed everybody from in the days of the Abbey when it was here. It was Mere Fish House, it's called. It's one of an astounding example, a medieval fish house. So I had to cover this all angles. So at first, when I studied photogrammetry and how easy it was to do, I made some extension poles. You know, I have these like long extension poles for my landing net for fishing, which go up about 4 meters. So I put my camera on the top of those and my iPad sometimes, and I just got up. And you might think, oh, why is there a 13-inch iPad on top of that? Well, the reason was that when it's way up high, you can't actually see the screen. I tried it with an iPhone at first, so it was just much easier to put one of these like paper things, you know, a non-reflective screen cover, so that from a distance, 3 meters, I could actually see the bits that were being covered and making sure I was getting a clean scan. But that was using LiDAR, you know, which does have its drawbacks because it's not very good with reflective surfaces. So car windscreens, windows, things like that. There is a workaround. You can put some chalk spray on it or some masking tape, but then you've got to replace those things in a 3D software like Maya or Blender later, you know, and it's quite a workflow, which you don't want. Whereas today's Radiance fields, they've taken that away because of the nature of the Radiance field. You get the caustics and the reflections in there. You know,
So you experienced the whole story from starting from photogrammetry, going to neural radiance field, and
to photogrammetry and then to LiDAR.
LiDAR, and then neural radiance field, and then in the end, the newest kid on the block is Gaussian splatting.
Yeah, Gaussian splatting, yeah, and they've revolutionized everything, the Gaussian splatting. However, you know, in some professional aspects of the work of capturing buildings for archaeology, heritage, history, what have you, they always use photogrammetry today, and that itself, at the highest levels, is always the case because the mesh that you get back, the mesh is something that you need to work with in 3D software, and the mesh you get back is far superior to the mesh that you get currently from Gaussian splatting or from NERFs, neural radiance fields. Neural radiance fields, Gaussian splatting are just the same thing. They are radiance fields, it's just they don't use a neural engine to process them anymore. So it's actually quite interesting because the neural radiance fields, Michael and yourself probably know this because you process them independently. They took hours, actually days, to train before, didn't they? To train a model once you had captured it.
The
true.
original Nerf did, and then with Instant NGP, it kind of dropped that
Yeah.
down to being near instant.
Yeah. I often say to people, it's like the mathematics on the render equation are absolutely astounding. There's like at least half of the Greek alphabet in there, you know. but it's like they were really slow before, and thanks to NVIDIA and the power of the graphics cards that we have today, somebody just was like, here, hold my drink, I'll just quickly change this and I'll make it 1,000 times faster at one of the computer vision things like CVPR or CGraph. It just speeded up really dramatically one day, to the point that we can actually process the Gaussian splats on a device of like any device in the last 4 or 5 years, either Android or iOS will handle processing a 3D model in Gaussian splatting within a certain amount of time. Of course, the better it is, the faster it is. But I use an iPhone 15 Pro, for example, and one of the apps that I use, Scaniverse, I can scan something and show someone with under 2 or 3 minutes, it's ready there on the device, and that's absolutely astounding compared to 10 hours training time on a model this time last year. Or, you know, so the speed that we've evolved with binary and processing is absolutely astounding.
Yeah, it's been pretty incredible to, you know, just turn your phone onto airplane mode and then just hit, you know, process still, and then, you know, like 45 seconds later, it's you already have like the first iteration of it. And you can continue to refine it, you know, as necessary, but just the fact that you can do this just completely locally on devices feels a little bit of like a fairy tale. But
yeah. Yeah, it is. It is a fairy tale, and I have to say as well, like, you know, when I was at school, I was very fortunate because I was one of the very first schools in the UK to get computer studies as a subject in 1982.
Yeah.
I left school that in 1984. You know, went to college and did microelectronics and computing and stuff as well.
Yeah.
But the actual, like, the history of the computer, you know, all the way back to the abacus with the Chinese and that thousands of years ago, and through all the different iterations, like Charles Babbage and the ENIAC that broke World War II's secrets and other things like that. These are like 1 kilobyte, but they were like silly, like, you know, 10 rooms with valves in them and things like that. And then the transistor arrived and everything changed. And then the integrated circuit arrived and then everything changed again. And we had electronic programmable read-only memories where you could just program them by you know, they had a little hole in the top. You just put it in a machine and it programmed it instantly. So it was like a matrix kind of thing. And I remember seeing them and going, oh my God, one day it'll be like that for computers. And it actually, it's getting there, isn't it? There's neural links and everything else as well. But the actual way that we can capture our reality has changed so much, and it is so quick now. And it's fascinating, the eye candy that we get back in a mere matter of seconds. I mean, I remember having a ZX81 in 1981 and just like sweating for 3 days because I knew I was getting a 16K RAM pack for my Christmas and going, oh, I can't wait, you know. But now we're into petaflops and terabytes and what have you. So it's absolutely incredible, the process and evolution as well through the videos and Intel's and Apple and everything like that. So that's what's made this possible. And I think what we use today for 3D capture has become the new photography for tomorrow, or the new videography for tomorrow, because ultimately we'll be able to drop into our scenes in years to come from now in a VR headset and be completely immersed as if we were here right now when we captured them. And it only takes a matter of minutes to scan a room these days. So.
Yeah, and so kind of talking about the evolution of like the equipment that you've progressed with, and even just a couple of years ago when you were using the pole with the iPad, I kind of want to talk about like just within a couple of years, like with the move into Radiance Fields now, like how has that capture workflow like evolved? Like what general like gear do you use in your day-to-day capture?
Right, so when I first started, I think I only used like something like a Galaxy S9 or something like that for those captures. I mean, I was actually, I have to mention that my company, when I lived in Scotland, I was in the Speyside area, and it was very rural, so I had to make a business, and I made one by selling people 360 Google Street Views using a 360 camera, because before the 360 camera, there were people going around stitching lots of pictures together, and they were very expensive to process. But when you had a double lens system on a camera, you could just take a picture, and then within 15 minutes you could have it on Google Maps. I made a business model from that, and also because a lot of music people I knew, I was making videos for them, making music videos, and very basic virtual reality back in 2016, 2017. They were impressed by this as well, and I've always had a love for those 360 cameras. I've taken them to crop circles, and I like the whole hashtag with them as well. It's like, no drone, no problem. You can just stick one of those 360 cameras up on a big pole, and it looks like a drone because of the way that they have they have very smooth. What do they call it? It's like it's like having a gimbal when you use one of those 360 cameras today. I actually have one; it's very good. But the one before that and the one before that had the same kind of stable flow animation thing that made it look super solid, super cinematic. So being able to take even the old stock for 2016, 2017, and stick it into Nerf software today, and tick the box that says equirectangular, and get absolute beautiful enclosed nerfs and radiance fields. It's amazing, that we can use the old software to turn spherical images into actual 3D spaces. It's crazy.
Yeah, so you've been able then to just like reprocess existing data sets that say like in the past you had no inclination that perhaps I can just reuse this 20 years from now and it will just reconstruct.
That's right, and you can take any old video as well, as long as you've got a movement around something. If it's a 2D video that you've got, you can take that and you can turn it into a 3D object. As long as you've got the right movements and you've got enough parallax to offer the processing, you'll get a 3D scene or a 3D movement from very old stock, a way back. You know, I've even put the odd bit of 8mm in I've got for years ago that other people took, but still I've managed to get pretty decent results on things. So yeah, it's fascinating. So, but photogrammetry, I must say though, when you take photogrammetry, you have to take hundreds up to thousands of photos around something. But you can do this quite smartly today by using a whole load of GoPros. In fact, Janusz, haven't you ordered 3 or 4 of them to put on like a long pole and make that a workflow some kind, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. I have ordered 6 of them. To the goal is to, like in this paper, where I have this hierarchical Gaussians, where you just have on your helmet, you have a setup of 2 cameras facing forward, backward, and to the side one. And my goal is to take a bike, ride around the streets here, and take some large scans, large scene scans, and process them just to see how it looks, how the quality is, how easy it is exactly to do it myself. Because usually, what I do if I capture a scan, I just take my phone and I encircle the object like 3 times or 4 times, and then I process it. But it's all mainly small scenes, right? So it's like objects, or you do it like for very, very compact scenes, not for large area scans. And my goal is now to see, can I actually reproduce Google Street View somehow in my neighborhood? And how much time does it take? How hard is it to process? Where can I fail with it? So those are questions for me. And I decided for the 6 action cameras because, you know, this is very variable. You can use it for this setup, but the other setup might be that you just take a pole and you put them all on the pole and then you try to scan a scene. And I want to get some experience how this works and how different the results are depending on the camera setup.
Yeah, yeah, and in Hollywood, that's exactly what they do. They use long poles with multiple cameras set at different heights. In fact, I saw one recently. It's called the Eiffel Tower because it's just all cameras on this pole.
Oh, wow.
That's their nickname
Yes.
for it. So,
Yeah.
but it's Eiffel, you know. And the thing is, as they go along, they can take 4 shots at a wall, or say the inside of a cathedral or what have you, and the different angles of the camera, like the top one's pointing up at the ceiling, and then the ones in the middle are kind of pointing straight at the walls, and the one at the bottom's pointing at the ground. So every time they take it, they get multiple data sets, and they can just move it along, and they can do the church, or you know, the big building, the big space in the inside, in a quarter of the time. There you go. There's the Eiffel
That's
Tower.
awesome.
Yeah. That is
It's,
awesome, isn't it? I want that. Yeah. When the bucks allow, I want one of those babies.
yeah, they're definitely not cheap, but you know, it's coming. The Eiffel Tower
No,
is
they're not too bad, actually. They're not too bad because you can get away with using the 250Ds, the Canons, the APS-C sensors on them. I think that's what that one's got.
yeah, you
Or you
can
can
I
use
guess
full frame ones, second-hand full frame ones, or you can just use a bunch of old phones and make your own, or a bunch of GoPros and make your own. You know, it's not difficult.
Yeah, exactly. So this was also my idea. If you have a pole, and usually if you have a scan, what you don't capture or you don't pay enough attention if you're not very familiar how to create great captures is that you just miss the floor, right? And then you do the reconstruction and you see holes in the floor. And if you have a pole where you have 6 cameras on it, you can just point one camera towards the floor, one towards the ceiling, and the others like a little bit shifted around, and then you should get a pretty comprehensive scan. And I really want to experience this.
Yeah. I've actually used it for a client once. Not my cameras. I was using these Canon RFs, like that for a big job, and I was like, wow, it was so beautiful. It's so crisp as well, using this reality capture software, which incidentally became free recently. Well, not free, but you know, after £1 million,
Yeah.
you have to pay them a license. But you know, if you're making £1 million, you don't mind paying them a license, I think. Same with Unreal Engine and these kind of apps like that, the game engines. They allow you to take your 3D scans in there as 3D assets, animate them, add all sorts of effects in a matter of minutes. In fact, I like impressing people by scanning them. If you put someone into an A pose or a T pose, and quickly do a photogrammetry scan around them. Photogrammetry is better than the LiDAR or the Gaussian splats at this stage for getting a decent mesh again. But you can put them into this Adobe Mixamo, which is free just with an email account. And you can have them rigged and animated in a matter of seconds. I mean, it's so quick that you can have someone with a matchstick man figure inside of them, and they don't believe it. They're just like, how did you do that? That's trickery. And you're like, no, this is the future. This is where we live. It's a great time to be alive, you know. So this is it's so quick, so fast. And I've put people in Unreal Engine and game engines and stuff, animated them running about as a first person shooter, and or just having a racing car game in one of the historical sites that we have here in Glastonbury recently. I made a racing car game because they're pre-made templates inside them. So it's just great if you can make your own 3D assets off a town or wherever, and drop them in there very quickly and with absolute minimal training. I mean, the learning curve to learn something like Blender or Unreal Engine would take you about maybe 4 to 8 hours to get the basics. So it's not difficult, and there is just so many great kids on the I say kids, yeah, but young people on the YouTube platforms and what have you that are very succinct in teaching you these different ways to use your phone, scan something and bring it into something and make it jump and dance and fight a dragon and all sorts of things. So it's exciting, you know, it's really exciting when you can take something that you've scanned, something that you love as well, might be a pet or a friend or something like that, and put them in there and see them just laugh and have great fun as a game player, you know. So that's another great part of this evolution that we're in.
Yeah, and it seems like people are starting to use Houdini as well a lot more frequently with Gaussian splatting as well over the last couple of months too, which really allow you to get everything like rigged up and animated, and you know, kind of like you were saying, just having a bit of fun with some of these lifelike captures. But
yeah,
one of the things that I want to ask you about actually is just going back to the actual capture process itself. So say you know you don't have like the full Eiffel Tower. Say you just have you either like a DSLR or a phone camera. You know, are you shooting videos for this? Are you shooting photos? Like what's your general workflow to capture?
Yeah, so there are a few different ways. I mean, generally, a phone is fine. Any phone of the last 4 or 5 years is fine to get a decent capture using a multitude of apps. There's like Polycam 3Ds. That's the one that Displayland, the developer Chris Heinrich, he became Polycam 3D. Scaniverse has been around forever. I paid for my version in the beginning, but I think Niantic Labs, who own Pokemon, they bought that one over and it's free now for anybody to download right now. And the other ones I love are obviously Luma Labs, but I did some beta testing for a lot of these apps before they were released. There was a fantastic one, it's still probably available, called Trinio. Those guys are great as well, and I think they use LiDAR and photogrammetry. You get very nice crisp scans with their app. Metascan, Tim Field is the developer over there. He's got a great app there as well, and he's one of the first to put me onto Gaussian splats as something that could be done on the phone. But I love Metascan for its ability to capture really clean photogrammetry and LiDAR scans as well. And of course, Luma Labs, which are, you know, the absolute like geniuses, the Gaussian splat world and Radiance Fields world. And I was an early tester for them as well, maybe 2 years coming up in October or September. I was one of the first ones to sign up for their beta testing. And beta testing, incidentally, is very easy to get anybody to get into. You just have to get in touch with the developers of apps and tell them that you're interested to help them. So anything that goes wrong with the app while you're testing it and getting it months before it comes to market, you just have to like take a screen capture of what the bug is and then send it to them and say, I was doing this when this happened. And then they're really helpful. That's really helpful to those developers, and tell them what phone you were on and what you were doing at the time and stuff. So you can get some of the apps way before they come out to the public. In fact, just recently, Luma Labs have a different app called Dream Machine, which is a generative AI. It's different to what we're doing here, but certainly I'm on the early access program as well, and I love that stuff as well. That's a different scene though. But certainly, if you become a beta tester, you can get really good discounts as well, and sometimes pro accounts for life after they come public access. You just get them free with lots of 4K pro renders and what have you. So I've been using those, especially Luma Labs, because I just love the way that they allow you to keyframe once you've scanned something. I made an example of this on one of my feeds the other day. Once you've scanned something, you can actually then just go in and then re-keyframe where you want the camera to go. And that's something that's difficult. If you even with a cinema camera, it's very difficult to make some of those movements. But with keyframes, we just say, I want my camera here now. I want it to look, here's one here. This is a good example, a scan I did along a street in Wells, city along the road there. And this keyframing, just to be able to walk through a scene. This is 3D scans as well. You would think that this is a video, but it's actually a 3D scene. There's a mesh involved in things with this scene. And again, you could, you know, drop visual effects into that in Unreal Engine and what have you, because it's a neural radiance field scan. But they're just lovely how they unfold like that and give you this cinematic view. You know, the cinema cameras, even on a stabilizer, you'd be really hard pushed to get that kind of cinematic effect. You'll see a car coming the other way because it picked up on the nerf as it was moving. But still, you see that how well you can give a tour, and you can walk in that in a VR headset, I expect.
Yeah, yeah, no, I believe you can, especially now with tools like Gracia VR. You can throw it right into your headset and walk around and explore it. One of the things I want to ask you too, so is just like, do you have like when you're going out and capturing, do you prefer to shoot like individual like still images, or are you just kind of like hitting record on the video button and just going for a walk?
Well, yeah, in the old days it was a lot of photogrammetry, but now you can just use slow motion video instead. I think it was yourself who mentioned this as well about 120 frames a second is pretty fine on full HD on any phone. So if you see a scene that you like and you've not got an app installed, you can always take a little video clip of at 120 FPS slow motion video, and then take it home and upload it to one of these apps like Luma Labs or Polycam, and then get back your 3D model as well. So I think slow motion video makes it easier. I've also been, I got hit up a couple of years ago by Shutterstock to become a vendor for virtual productions, 3D productions. So they use special screens at the other end with my scans that they send me out to fetch for them. And some of those that I've sent to them, they also get sent over to the likes of ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, George Lucas Company, and what have you. But they asked me to use a cinema camera for that with very high codecs that eat up about 8 gigabits a minute. Because they're taking 13 stops every time. It's like HDR. It's 13 stops of video at 60 frames a second, so it just chews up but you get these beautiful detail. This is a 422 HQ Apple ProRes codec scan. So the quality is so much better, but you would still get a comparable quality if you were taking RAWs on a full frame camera. Using a very fast lens, but it doesn't need to be that fast actually. You can have something like a 20mm lens, or depending, not a fisheye lens, but I think 14's the limit. 14mm, just wide angle, very fast at like 2 or 2.8 or something like that. Take lots of photos. Certainly, that's what I shoot those on when I use a cinema camera. But I use it on a crane gimbal, on a heavy duty monopod. And I take off the image stabilization because you want to minimize motion blur as much as you can.
Yeah.
And then I shoot those scenes at a very slow pace, and I kind of slightly bend my knees and I make a kind of heel to toe tread. It looks a bit stupid from a distance, but where I can, I prefer actually going backwards because I find it easier to put the ball of my foot down first and then to the heel, and it minimizes any bumps as you go backwards. But it's really good if you walk through it first, because one time I fell backwards just because it was a little step in the church, and I was like, oh, where did that come from? And that was nearly a very expensive mistake, where, you know, the best part of £4,000 on the end of a gimbal. It's like, oh, oops. But I managed to avoid it. But I had to completely redo the scan because it spoiled it. But yeah, that's the other thing. It's just, again, when I shoot those 60 frames a second, I slow them down in post-production to about 24 frames. And then I put them into the software, and then I get those results. I think there's one that you have at Sherborne Abbey as well. So you see the difference between that and a phone scan, but only if you're looking, and only if you know what to look for will you see the difference, because they're quite comparable straight out on iPhone or an Android and this. But yeah, probably there would be a big difference. Maybe I should go back and shoot that with an iPhone and just see if what the difference is. Yeah.
Maybe when we go into the scene here, so how would you scan the scene? Do you have like a path which you repeat multiple times? Do you go the path just once? Because usually you want to have the scene scanned from as many angles as possible.
Yeah, you must offer parallax to the lens for the 3D reconstruction. So what you have to do for this particular one, I went in straight, yeah, but I come out at a slight V, slightly to the side. I go back out again, and then I move back in again to the same point I was before, and then I do another V on the way back out. So it's like 4 back and forward, yeah, but slight angle and slight tilt on the second one, so that you get where the candle holders are and things in the square section. So
Right
you can get around those little glass things, because you can't go straight at an object when you make a Gaussian splat. It's no good. You can go straight along an object, like a scene, like the front of a shop or something like that. But it's much better if you go in at a slight angle and out at a slight angle, and in at a slight angle and out at a slight angle. That's how you'll get a reconstruction like that. But it's a definite no-no just to go straight at something, because it just won't work. Because when you move the model to the side, you'll see where there is no information behind something.
Yeah.
And it just causes a big blur, as you well know. But I'm just explaining for these
Yeah,
viewers at the moment. Yeah.
And kind of speaking about that blur, and as you were mentioning, like walking backwards and to cut down on like the actual bumpiness, can you talk a little bit about like why it's important to, or like like you're just saying, cutting down on blur and capturing stage?
Yeah, motion blur. That's one of the advantages of taking photographs instead. And another advantage as well is that when you're in a public space like a big cathedral and stuff, you can't stop people walking in front of you unless you've actually got, like I've had heritage development managers open up the churches for me privately so I can go in and scan them hours, but when it's busy and there's a lot of people there and they're like, you've got a lot of people walking back and forward. When you're taking photographs, it's great because you can just stop and wait for them to move or make their prayer or whatever and leave that chapel and then start again. Or you can hit the pause button on your video camera and just stay in the same spot so the camera stays in the same spot. But it can be quite annoying, and you have to be quite patient with the public in these buildings if you want to just capture on the fly on your own without giving any permission to the church or anything like that. But these days I tend to walk into the church and tell them what I do. Like a recent example, I was in Salisbury Cathedral, and I went in there and I said to them, I do these scans. And they said, oh, no, we use these people at Matterport. They make these scans on these LiDARs and they're very expensive. I don't think it'll be comparable what you're going to do with your phone there. And I said, okay, then. And then I went home and I edited all the things that I'd taken inside it. And their marketing team were like, are you the guy that came to the door and gave it? I said, yeah, that's me. I remember I told you that I did before I arrived. And they were like, yeah, well, we never realized they were this good.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
This is what we can do with a phone these days. And I might add to that as well. The iPhone 15 Pro, because of the EU regulations, now allows a USB-C card to go into it. And this also allows you to put in these T5 SSD drives.
Yeah.
Well, you get these small SSD drives, And that's what I use on the cinema camera to capture the codecs that I do that eat up 6 or 8 gigs a minute. But I can also put the same Pocket Cinema Camera app into the iPhone, which is free as well. It's the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera app. I put that in to my iPhone 15 Pro, and I put the same cable that feeds 40 gigs a second to the disc, and I can use that to capture the same cinema codecs that I get from the cinema camera. And that's absolutely amazing because it's in my
Oh wow,
pocket.
yeah.
It's an actual cinema camera in my pocket. And
Right.
sometimes I use the actual same rig that I would use for protecting the cinema camera. I put an iPhone holder in here, and then I've got a little thing there for attaching the hard drive to as well. And when I put it up high at an angle, I can tilt that angle, because you do need a tilt. I'll just go into this briefly. When you're going around an object, you first point, if it's an object you can get completely around, you first point the phone straight at the object, parallel to it, all the way around, and make a circle around it. And then you want to drop the phone and tilt it slightly up at about 30 degrees towards, so that you get an upward angle, and you do another loop. And then you go up again and you tilt it down, so you get another loop, and you cover the parts at the top, especially statues and their heads and things. You need to get that bit, or you're going to end up with a hole in the head.
Yeah.
So you've just got to make sure that you've got all the different angles. So 3 or 4 loops will do that. And it's the same with rooms as well. When you scan a room, for example, it's better to focus on something in the middle of the room. I don't know, do you have the Lautrec exhibition that I was at recently, Michael?
Let me check.
Lautrec, yes. I was at this exhibition for the French artist Lautrec up in Bath, at the Victoria Gallery in Bath. And someone asked me, could they make this amazing splat canvas editor for Gaussian splats? And he said to me, that one of the developers, he said, "How do you get such clean scans?" And I was saying, "Oh, it's not what you think. It's not going along each wall, turning at a right angle, doing the next wall, turning at a right angle. You just focus on something in the middle of the room, and you make 3 or 4 loops, and make sure that you've got a kind of downward angle that's going to capture the floors as you do your loop, and an upward angle that's going to capture the ceilings, and then one straight at, and that's going to capture the walls. But you point it at something in the middle of the room and you go around, and if there's nothing in the middle of the room, you just pretend that there is, and you just go around it anyway, and that will capture a room cleanly. So that's another
That's actually a really good advice. I mean, I never did it, and I think it also looks a little bit weird if you go just turning around basically nothing, and people just staring at you. What the guy's doing there, right?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, there is an app that does Gaussian splats where they've got a map system, Overlands, Map to Earn, or whatever it's called, over the reality, that's right. Now, when you set up that app and it opens, they give you this like kind of hexagonal triangle, a kind of this shape. And if nothing's there, you can just place that and walk around that until you've covered all sides. That's quite interesting as well for capturing big spaces. And then, I'm working with that on a project in Spain soon, Alhambra's Palace. They're using that map to earn thing because they're going to AR things inside there. But currently, that place gets something like 2,500-3,000 visitors per day every year, and it's 2.5 million visitors a year. And we hope that using that map system and Web3, that we'll be able to take those numbers up to 100 million in extended reality within a couple of years, because it's so popular, and it'll be so immersive. I've used their map system a couple of times actually. It's very nice, as long as you use a stabilizer and you're very slow and take your time. But some of them are a bit too many floaters in my opinion for some of the maps that I've seen on that system. But you can, if it's done carefully, it can work well. And that's the same with any app, as long as you take your time. And again, reduce the motion blur where you can, use a gimbal or a Steadicam of some kind, and just make sure that you've got nice slow movements, regardless of how stupid you look with your bent knees or walking backwards or what have you. You will get a clean scan, and that's the difference. That's the only difference with my scans and anybody else's that says, "Oh, you're a great scanner." It's like, no, I'm just slower because I'm an old dude.
That's sometimes helpful, isn't it? So
Yeah,
how do you approach such a big project like the Alhambra's Palaces? Is it just, do you have a map? how do you
Oh
plan?
no,
How
no,
you want to
there's
scan?
lots of logistics as well. I might have to add
Mhm.
this as well. There's things like public liability insurance and things like that you've got to cover. Drone licenses, drone permits, fees for all these things as well. And the safety, everybody involved who's scanning, and also things like privacy. You know, people's privacy, because some of these places are people praying or they're putting flowers down at a grave
Mhm.
if you're at a churchyard or whatever. And I think that's wrong if you're just walking through at the side, scanning something, while
Mhm.
somebody's paying their respects to somebody or lighting a candle for somebody, you know. So I think it's you just got to back off in those situations and just wait patiently until they're either finished or go back another day earlier than anybody will get out of bed and when it's open to get around it, you know. Because yeah, there's lots of things to consider, and also you've got to. I think mostly because of my contract with Shutterstock, it's one of those things where you've got to make sure you don't pick up like a Coca-Cola sign or something like that while you're scanning, because you don't want that to be in your actual scan at the end of the day. You might have a beautiful scan in a church, and then next door to it, there's some like advertising that, you know, isn't, people aren't going to watch it. Or you know, you can't put it up there because the lawyers are going to come down on you because you've picked up their sign in the background and saying, hey, what do you think you're playing at? You can't advertise that. It's the same way like if you were going to scan a beer bottle, don't do it. You'll just end up in trouble because it's just deliberate advertising, and it's not allowed to do that. You know, they've got copyrights for reasons. So I'm wondering if that's me or you, Michael. Yeah. The sirens in the back. But yeah, so approaching those things logistically, obviously for a shot of the Alhambras Palace, or say it was something like Edinburgh Castle, it's difficult and expensive to get those drone licenses. So you've got to make
Mhm.
sure that you can get them. But once you've got a nice clean circle of something like that, or two or three circles of a construction site or a castle or something like that, that's enough to put into 3D software today. Even the mobile 3D software apps put that footage in. I used Polycam recently for some crop circles that I scanned with my drone, and they came out wonderfully, just with a circle, you know. One circle was enough, actually. So something like that, Alhambras, yeah, it would be nice to get the drone up and around it. I've seen some photogrammetry captures that have been done and posted free on Sketchfab. Incidentally, it's a great place for posting your 3D assets once you've made them on your phone or whatever. So I've seen some nice things there. I've taken them into Blender and I've done some logistics myself. So that's a useful resource for something like that, where I can take a copy of the palace before I visit, you know, before I actually
Mhm.
fly over there, and look at it and see, right, where would be the best place to start? Where could I launch from? Where can I land? And
Mhm.
then these bits in between, what are the nicest details that I want to cover? Am I going to use photogrammetry there, or am I going to use the video camera, Gaussian splats, or LiDAR? You know, there's so many things. It's an individual thing. Each thing that you see, you make up your mind on the spot. That's how I feel about it. But you know, I'm not doing it at the highest levels. The highest levels use very expensive LiDARs and photogrammetry equipment. This is like a budget version of that, but it still delivers the same comparable results as the top
Mhm.
levels. But hopefully one day the heritage departments of the world will be taking this on, and as they told me, because they've pulled me in and offered me a percentage of this project, because we're not going to, once we finish with this project, we're going to do other projects. This is
Mhm.
just, you know, they told me I was a pivotal point in this because of the scans that I've been making and posting on my feeds for the last 5 years or whatever. So I'm quite
Yeah,
happy
there.
about that. I've gained a reputation as a content creator, doing what content creators do, producing decent content.
Your scans are really amazing, and because you do a lot of scans, did you notice, for instance, a difference between nerves and Gaussian splatting? So if you put the same photos into the software, is the result comparable? Where does one break, where the other shines, and vice versa?
Well, raw images are better than JPEGs. first off, you know, but then the raw workflow is like you've got to put things into Lightroom. And I have to say as well, my career mostly has involved cameras over 3 or 4 decades now, coming up in 4 decades. Video cameras from pneumatic VHS right through, you know, high 8 DV to today's cameras. But also the stills cameras as well. I've been using those since as a hobby since 1987, and I love those. But when digital came along, I realised I wasn't going to be a photographer for long because it was just the market was saturated, and I had the vision to see that I was going to have to move into something else, and that's when I went into video production instead. You know, but I was using a lot of black and white slides and things like that as well when I did stuff in the past. So I have a very good understanding, almost an almost obsession on cameras, lens coatings and things like that. You know, you don't want to get into an argument with me over those things, but certainly I love my cameras, and I love the old cameras and the quality of cameras and lenses. Currently, I shoot on Leica lenses. But I like Canons, I like Nikons, I like Voigtlanders, I like, you know, vintage lenses as well. But I just want to eliminate any lens aberrations, anything like that, by using top quality glass always, because you can have great glass on a rubbish sensor and still get a good result, but you can't have rubbish glass on a great sensor and get a result. It's all about spatial fidelity at the end of the day, and how to eliminate the flaws that lenses can bring sometimes through flares, especially fisheye lenses and things like that, flaring and things because of the nature of them. But yeah, it's just about geeking out about what will actually produce the best results. And for the record, I feel, you know, because of the problems that you can get with changing lenses and things getting trapped inside a lens, dust and what have you, you can get back to the post-production set and you look at it and go, oh no, there's a little bit of an eyelash in there or something. I don't know how that got in, but it's right on the sensor and it's like a foot long on the screen. And you go, but with an iPhone or with an Android, you've got it's enclosed, so you never get those issues, and you can
Mhm.
still produce pretty nice scans. Plus, it's in your back pocket. It's pretty small, compact form, and you can just pull it out and make amazing art or copy something in a jiffy. You know, and that's what I love about it. So
So
Yeah,
what I'm interested in, sorry, Mike, can I ask you a
yeah.
question? So I would really like to know where you see the difference in the renderings. So in the renderings itself, where shines one over the other. So let's say you have the same photos and you put them in the Gaussian splatting rendering,
mm,
and also in the normal radiance field rendering. So
mm.
where the differences, or where you prefer maybe one rendering over the other? Is that
Yeah,
something?
yeah, that's an interesting question because you're right. Nerf came first. You know, the neural radiance field came first, and now we take away the neural, we're just left with the radiance field and became Gaussian splatting 3D GS. But certainly the Nerf is a much better mesh, I felt. I was using 3D Presso software that got nice meshes from Nerfs. And I like the Nerf better. Something about it is just more solid, and I liked. I think you're the same, Michael, aren't you? We've spoken about this in the past.
Yeah, the general fidelity and I would say like lifelike appearance in Nerfs look better
Mm.
to me than Gaussian splatting. And I think a lot of work has kind of gone into Gaussian splatting to try and close the gap a bit, which admittedly, it definitely has. It's been less than, or it's been roughly a little bit over a year since the paper came out. And yeah, I still think that Nerfs just look more lifelike.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it was a guy called Dade, Oregon, over at Shutterstock said this to me. He said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You know, where we're at just now with this technology is early days yet. So it will become, they'll be getting better. The meshes will get better for Gaussian splats, but it's just the nature of the splat. Because a Gaussian, incidentally, for people who don't know, is like a little banana shape. And it just depends on which way that you turn that you get the actual render from it. That's why they're difficult to get a mesh. Whereas the radiance field was a bit different. It was a cluster, like a little cone cluster, and it still gave you the caustics and the reflections like Gaussian splats do, but in a different kind of way. And it gave a much better mesh for using in 3D software at a later date. But that's the answer to it. Definitely Nerf is better than Splat at this stage, but the Splat is catching up because I have seen new softwares and new techniques for extracting or using LiDAR at the same time or whatever it is that they're doing, but it's certainly getting better. And the recent computer vision thing in Denver, SIGGRAPH, there was loads of papers that came out of that, as I'm sure you're aware of, showing how to train Gaussian splats better.
Yeah. So would you say, is there something like in particular that you're most excited for to see, like a problem that's like solved in the future, or like a feature that's eventually enabled?
Yeah, I think better meshes, clean meshes, especially from reflective surfaces and things like that would be good. But I mean, the way that it's going, we've got real-time Gaussian splat video. So it's 4D video is actually here, 4D volumetric video, and that's quite special. That's going to really change all the avatars inside the VR, AR, XR spaces as we move towards the metaverse architecture or omniverse architecture, 3D Internet of Tomorrow architecture. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some very, very cool demos as of late about, like, moving into 4D and some of those outputs. So hopefully they arrive sooner than later for the general public to really be able to leverage. But so it looks like we just lost Ian really briefly. Okay, there he is again.
That's exactly what I want for
He's back.
yeah. So the company I've got at the moment, Cosmic Hope Media, we've been going for quite a few years anyway. But today, we're looking at these emerging technologies, if you like, and I think that one of the most impressive things about immersive storytelling is the fact that you don't need a narrative. You just need to film something immersively and let people make their own minds up about what story they want to pull from that experience, by being in it. And you don't need to point out, this is going on, They can just be there and go, oh wow, oh, be saddened or enlightened by it, or made to feel calm or made to feel exhilarated in a safe way, and ethically and morally as well, that we tell those stories, because nobody wants to go to some war scene, like a lot of people think is where journalism is going to go, that VR and AR will go to war scenes and show the carnage of some of the things that happen there. And we don't want that. I think there has to be some protection, the ethics and morals behind what we make immersively with this technology.
Yeah, and so just out of curiosity, so what would you have any recommendations for someone who's just either getting started or just like hearing about this technology for like the first time? Like, what would you suggest that they do?
Sure. Just go to the App Store, download some app like Scaniverse, because that way you're going to get instant gratification. Put it on your phone, sit in a private room or somewhere where you've got a nice object in front of you. And that you can make a kind of make it a small object, but something interesting, if you like, and make an almost like an umbrella like dome over that object with your phone, and then press the process button. Make sure you've covered all the sides around it and above it, and press the process button and wait and see your result, and then just keep practicing and then get bigger and bigger with the objects that you want to scan. But Luma Labs is a great app as well. So is Polycam, so is Metascan, Trinio as well, as I mentioned. And some of them are free and some of them have got like a paid tier after so many scans and stuff like that. But for me, instant gratification comes from the Scaniverse app, because it's just been there all the time, and it's amazing that it's actually free for the capabilities that it has. So yeah,
amazing.
So,
Thank you.
maybe one last question from my side. What is a project you are most proud of, or what is the project you really, really love and which you enjoy the most, and where you got the best results?
all right. So there are so many, but I think the best one for me was I turned up to the Gold Hill in Shaftesbury. The Gold Hill was made famous by a bread advert back in the 80s or something like that. I always thought the place was in Yorkshire because of this bread advert, because it had this guy pushing a bike up a hill with a bread basket on his bike, you know, and it was shot by Ridley Scott. Yeah, so it gives you the idea how good the quality was. Yeah, Ridley Scott, he picked up a BAFTA for shooting that hill with this guy in his bread basket that sounded like he was from Yorkshire, you know. But I went there and I scanned that, and when I got there, it was raining, and I was like, "Yeah!" And people were like, it must be because he's Scottish and he loves this weather, you know." But I was like, no, it's because of the footfall. There's not going to be so many tourists here today because because of the drizzle. And I thought, that's great, yeah. So I put an umbrella over the camera, in the gimbal, in the crane, and I walked down the Gold Hill and I scanned it, and I came back and I did that a few times, and I eventually got the stuff that I needed, you know, the ProRes codecs, and I sent it to Shutterstock, and they were happy. They took it to SIGGRAPH, and they paid me handsomely
Oh, wow.
for it. And that's what made me. I was like, yes. And it wasn't just that; it was because it was such an overcast day. Because overcast days are the best days to scan. Incidentally, you don't want a sunny day. Because if you have a sunny day, the textures have the light and shadows baked into them. So you want this evenly balanced diffused light. This is the scan here, actually. So you see, I actually scanned the whole street like this, and in the distance, it's not so visible on here. You could see so far away into the distance where the mist was on the hills, miles and miles away. And on a better resolution screen, you can see that. And to me, I was just like, whoop whoop, yes, I've nailed it. So I was so happy about that. So that's one of my favorite ones. I never got a BAFTA, but I did get a nice paycheck, and that's what made it such a great scan. So that's the truth of the matter.
Yeah,
That
it's
sounds
an amazing
awesome, yeah.
capture.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I think that pretty much puts us at just that time now. So yeah, thank you, Ian, so much for joining us today and speaking to us. And yeah, this has been really amazing to take a look at some of your captures and just kind of like, you know, I guess you could call it like an OG member of like the Radiance Field community to this point. So yeah, thank you for spending the time with us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me as well. It's been lovely to speak about the things that I'm enthused about. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having you here with us.
And just one other announcement too. So we'll be returning next week as well. We're gonna be speaking at 10 a.m. PST, 1 p.m. EST, and our guest is going to be Rulong Lee from Nerf Studio, who you may recognize as the creator of NerfHack, as well as the core maintainer of GSplat and Nerf Studio's repository. So that's going to be, and he's also he's done quite a lot. So he's also an author on Nerf XL from NVIDIA, as well as the most recently released FVDB at SIGGRAPH. So definitely recommend coming back and tuning in for that. It's going to be another really great chat. But yeah, no, thank you so much for everyone who has tuned in today.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
It was great to have you here.
Okay. Good night. Bye.
Bye.